This is so cold.
Car Wizard, Car Wizard, Car Wizard. We're filming. Great, but we need to film. We got video to make.
Okay.
People are watching, after all. Don't waste their time.
I'm making a mess of everything. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Actually, we're going to talk about one of the other really good engines. A lot of you mentioned in the comments of the 3.8. What about the 4.6 2-valve? You guys are right. It's another really good engine. This happens to be a 3-valve, but today we're going to talk about the 2-valve Ford 4.6 liter. I've seen a lot of these engines in trucks and Mustangs and several other models I'll go over here in a minute, but they are very, very good engines as well. I'm talking about the ones, like I said, the 2-valve that don't have cam phasers, that don't have variable valve timing, just solid cam gears. Those engines are pretty bulletproof. They're pretty awesome. I'm not really much into Fords, but I will hand it to them. They did pretty good on that motor. The 4.6 was actually introduced in the 1991 Lincoln Town Car. That's the first time you've seen one of these engines in a production car. It was actually manufactured at two different plants, one of them being the Romeo plant in Michigan and the Windsor plant in Ontario, Canada. There's two different places this motor was assembled and made ready for installation in production vehicles. These engines are also called modular. They share a lot of things with the 5.4 and the 4.6. They share a lot of similarities. The tooling, the bearings, and everything was made so that the factory could re-gear or change this or change that and quickly switch over to the other model without a huge retooling of the whole factory. There's a lot of similarities in the block between a 4.6 and a 5.4. They almost look similar if you set them side by side. The 5.4 has a taller deck on it, more stroke, more torque. The 4.6 came with different cams, different cam bearings, different crankshafts. They had aluminum blocks, some had cast iron blocks. There was a lot of differences between the years. As far as power goes, the early 4.6s only had 190 horsepower. To the 99 to 04 Mustangs, power actually had reached a point of 260 horsepower. Really pretty respectable for a 4.6 liter motor. Really, and with mods and tuning, there's a lot of power that can be made with these motors. This happens to be the 3-valve, and it replaced the 2-valve in 2005 in the new Mustang, the SN195 that came out. They added cam phasers and variable valve timing, and although they do have some trouble with the cam phasers on these, it's not such a huge problem as it was in the 5.4s. And I've actually changed cam phasers on these just by removing the valve cover. I can actually wiggle out the phaser and put a new one on, and you're back in business. They're very easy to work on. The parts are available. They're not super expensive on the 3 valves, but the 2 valves are even simpler yet. That's why I call them more reliable and probably a better buy for the money if you're looking for something that's just going to go and go and go and go. The 2-valve is old enough that you can readily find salvage parts, new parts. The prices are fairly cheap. Crazy D in the office actually has a green F-150. It's got over 200 something, some huge amount of miles on it, and the motor just runs great, starts right up. It's a 2-valve. They didn't put this engine in just one or two models or a few cars. They put them in a whole slew of vehicles, just like the 3800 GM. Let's go down the list. I'll talk about different vehicles in the years. They used the 4.6 in the Lincoln Town Car from 91 to 2011. That's a huge span. Very, very many years and very many units made. They actually started putting them in the Crown Vic in 92, and they actually used them a year longer to 2012 in the Crown Vic. There's a few Police Interceptor Crown Vics that have these motors in them as well, 2013 or whatever, but they put them in the Thunderbird from 94 to 97. The reason why they didn't go any further than that, because they stopped making the Thunderbird in 97, as far as the model that we're familiar with in those years. They put them in Ford trucks from 1995 to 2010. There's a huge span of those. Some of them in the newer will have 3 valves, which are the junky ones. Some of them will have 2 valves. Some of them will have 4 valves. Some of them will have 6 valves. Some of them will have 8 valves. Some of them will have 10 valves. Some of them will have 12 valves. Some of them will have 14 valves. Some of them will have 16 valves. Some of them will have 18 valves. Some of them will have 20 valves. Some of them will have 24 valves. Some of them will have 26 valves. Some of them will have 27 valves. Some of them will have 28 valves. Some of them will have 29 valves. Some of them will have 30 valves. Some of them will have 31 valves. Some of them will have 32 valves. Some of them will have 34 valves. Some of them will have 35 valves. Some of them will have 36 valves. Some of them will have 37 valves. Some of them will have 38 valves. Some of them will have 39 valves. Some of them will have 40 valves. Some of them will have 41 valves. Some of them will have 42 valves. Some of them will have 43 valves. Some of them will have 44 valves. Some of them will But the 2 valves, again, all the years they use those are very, very good, bulletproof motors. They do have issues with the threads on the spark plugs. The threads, there's not very many threads there, and it actually can blow spark plugs out. But it's easily repairable with helicoils. You can put a new spark plug in, and it's not that huge of a job. I'm not going to complain too much about it because it's not too hard to fix. They had them in Ford Explorers actually from 02 to 05. That's pretty cool SUV to have that kind of power in a mid-size SUV. So, but they only had them in there for a few years, so there's some out there. The Mustang had them from 96 to 04. Those are all 2 valves. Just like I said earlier, in 05 they switched to this 3 valve. These are the GT models from 96 to 04, the 2 valve 4.6. They're all over the place. You can't go any part of town in most cities and not see one. They're all over the place. And actually in 93, Aston Martin had a concept car called the Lagonda. It had a Ford 4.6 in it. This is the years where I believe that Ford started looking into buying Aston Martin, Jaguar, and all these different, but it was in one of those. So let's take a look at this engine. I'm going to use it as an example. It's not a 2 valve, but it looks similar. We're going to use it as an example. It's such an awesome car, I can't get enough video of it. So let's take a look. As we can see down here is the water pump. Down there. Take the belt off, take the pulley off. Very, very easy to do a water pump on these. There's the alternator. Again, very, very easy to do alternator or water pump on these. Let's see what else is there. All the coils, these have individual coils, even the 2 valves have it. There's a coil, there's a coil, there's a coil, and there's one back there. If you get a misfire for a bad coil or a bad spark plug, you just take the one coil out. There's the spark plug down in the hole, and very easy, very simple to change out. The power steering pump is over here. Easily accessible if you have to change it out. It's not hidden under a bunch of crap. It's just right there, ready to be pulled out. Not hard to do. And there's the AC compressor. They're not exactly easy to change out on this, but it's not horribly hard either. It's not a big deal. If someone said they needed a new compressor on a 4.6, it's no sweat. I'd be like, no problem. Let's get it replaced for you. And the starters on these, you can't really see it, but you have to be done from underneath, obviously, but they're not hard to change out either. This one was in here recently on a video for a new fan that took care of his overheating problem. Very happy with that. Then he just that same day or the next day, he called and said there's a whirring noise and something's wrong. And this is a common scenario you run into running a shop. There could be other issues with a car that you didn't even work on those parts. And a day later after you worked on it, that part fails. And it's always like, well, what did you do to my car? His alternator, the bearings actually failed on it. You can hear it. You know, I changed the fan out and the bearings locked up on the alternator. There's the alternator there. Like I said a minute ago, it's easy to change out. We put a new alternator and a new belt, and he's back in business. It's nice and quiet. Obviously, the bearings inside the alternator have nothing to do with putting a fan in, but it's easy to think that when you're the owner of the car and say, okay, so this car was running it great. They put a fan in my car. Now this happens. What did they do to my car? And in fact, the truth is we didn't do anything to his car to cause this. It was probably failing when he brought it here initially. It didn't show up until after he'd been driving around for a while and started sparking and making noises. And this guy wasn't upset. He's a very nice guy, very nice to deal with. And I'm very appreciative of that. But after we seen, I sent him a video of what's going on here. It's like, oh, he was like, oh yeah, it's totally just an old part and it failed. So, but that's not always the case. This guy was really nice and easy to deal with. I've worked on a lot of POS cars that everything on the car is on the brink of failure. If you so much as change a light bulb, everything else is now your responsibility. The power steering pump, the fuel pump, the battery, the starter. If any of those fail, all of a sudden, you did it. And it's just sometimes an ongoing problem. Most people aren't that way. I usually don't have that problem, but it is part of running a shop. There are scenarios where you replace a part. There's maybe in a system, there's 2 or 3 parts on the brink of failure. You replace one part, and now adds further stress to the parts down the line. Now they start failing. And it's like, well, why didn't we catch that? Well, I guess what we should have done is replace the entire system. But that never is an option because the customer says, oh, I don't have that kind of money right now. Okay, then it wasn't an option. So I try to keep things as low as I can on the price to be respectable to people, but sometimes things happen. I see here a cone filter, and I've said in previous videos I'm not a fan of them personally. It is the customer's responsibility when they install these to maintain them. You're supposed to pull these off every so often, clean them, and put the oil that you coat the filter in an oil. It's called servicing the filter. As you can see, it's never done. It's dry. I'll bring this up with him, just let him know he probably should service it, get a service kit, and it doesn't take very long, 5 minutes to service it. I actually had a customer with a Dodge Ram. It wasn't my customer, but it was a place I was working at. He had a K&N filter. He never serviced it for 10 years. All during this time, it was sucking in dirt. We pulled the intake off and looked down in there. It was just dirt all in there. You could take your hand and get the sand out of it. He was a farmer. It was in a sandy field all the time. The engine was shot, completely shot. He got so mad he called K&N. I thought this is a 1,000,000-mile filter, and the first thing they said, we want a list of all the receipts every time you service the filter. And his response was, oh, you're supposed to service the filter? Yes, sir. I could hear them they on the phone. They were standing right next to me. Yes, sir. You're supposed to service this filter and keep it oiled and clean. That's how it's a 1,000,000-mile filter. If you haven't done that, sir, then our warranty is not covered on this. He quickly hung up his phone and said, no more K&N filters. So, really, was that K&N's fault? No. In today's day and age, it's just hard enough to get people to even get their oil changed. You add stuff like that. I'm not knocking the guy. I understand. I mean, it's sold as it's just like you just install it and you're done, right? No, it needs to be serviced. Thinking of the modular engines, the 5.4s and the 4.6s, if you look through my video list, you'll find one that I did on the 5.4 and how horrible of an engine it is. Let's move over to this vehicle. I've got some more information for you. So the last time we did a video on a truck like this was a Lincoln Mark LT, and I replaced the engine in it. Here we are again. This is number 13 for me. I actually feel sorry for those people. I'm really sad for them. They just bought it. And whoever they bought it from put some snake oil to make it quiet it down just enough to get it sold. It didn't last very long, and the rattling, I mean, it rattles loud. It's bad. It's really bad. The next step in failure in this engine is a whole bank of cylinders will stop firing. But they were like, well, what do I do? And I told them the whole spiel. I've been through this over and over. It needs a new engine. I looked inside the oil fill. It's just sludge in there, full of sludge. I'm not going to reuse this engine. The passages on these that feed the oil supply to the cam phasers are just tiny little holes. Tiny little holes. When they get plugged, you're not going to spray anything or add anything to it to clean them out. There's no magic cure. And if you watch the video I did on the Mark LT, you'll see a stack of paper I showed where shops all across the country have given their confirmed fixes. It had over 400 confirmed fixes, and every one was new engine, new engine, new engine, new engine. That is the fix for this. They made millions of these trucks, literally, and there are some still on the road. Some people got lucky. Really poor oil changes, poor maintenance is what causes this. These engines are not forgiving of skipped oil changes and say, well, I'm at 5,000 miles, I'll just go to 8. And you do that over and over, and this is what you're stuck with. Anyways, I gave the customer the stack of papers that I give every single customer that shows almost 500 engines seemingly replaced for this problem. And I already know the routine. They go away. They have to think about it. They actually have to let this sink in because it's over $6,000. They ask other shops, they ask friends, and they get the same answer, a new engine. Finally, after a while, they accept it. They arrange the money. It's usually about a month or two. They come back and say, let's do it. It's the same scenario, and I don't blame them. It's like a new engine for this rattle. Yep, sorry. You bought a Ford 5.4 3-valve. There are people out there that claim they can just do the timing, gears, and this and that. What happens in 6 months when it starts doing it again? And then you're not that far away, you could have got another engine. I'm not going to mess with that. I'm not going to send them away. The rest of the engine is sludged up. It's going to have other issues. I'm not dealing with that. I'm giving them a new engine.
But Car Wizard, there's people watching this right now that are thinking, can I put a higher pressure oil pump on it?
How does that solve the sludge problem? How does that solve that this engine's been through neglected oil changes and there's just underneath the cam covers, under the valve covers, it looks like chicken grease just slobbed everywhere. It looks horrible. Do you want to put 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 into fixing the timing cover and you're still stuck with that? You have your old, worn out old engine with grease from the last guy that didn't maintain it, and now you're going to pay the price? Just get a new engine. Then you can have a truck that's going to last you. It's got the updated oil pump, updated parts. The engine is like a clean slate. You can go for another 150, 200,000 miles, no trouble. If you have one of these engines in your truck and it's not clacking and making noises and doesn't have cam phaser codes, make sure you do your oil changes. Don't skip the oil changes. If you do, this is where you'll find yourself every time. And like I said, I feel really bad for these people. They bought this truck and now they have to dump another $6,000 into it that they'll probably never get out of it. They have a loan on it and they can't just get rid of it. I hate that for them, I really do. But all we can do is get this motor swapped out. We use Powertrain products, that's where we get our engines from. We have a new one already sitting here. Let's go take a look at it. And there it is in all its glory. A fully remanufactured 5.4. They sell boatloads of these engines, tons of them. Jasper does, Powertrain products. It's like a big money maker for them. So we're going through the process of getting that motor out. This one's going to go in, and they'll have a good truck that will last them a long time, and this problem shouldn't reoccur again. So,
Hey, Car Wizard, how long is it going to take to get the old one out and this one in and get it back to the customer?
probably a week, because I have other things I'm doing in the shop. So I told them it's probably going to be about a week. So we'll get it out and put the new one in. So in closing, anytime I get a customer brings me a vehicle and I think if it's of interest and it's information that you guys can use, I'm going to do a video on it. It'll help you, save you guys some money, give you some information, some buying power when you're looking for a vehicle. And you say, well, what's a good car? What's a bad car? I'll be able to help you guys out with that. If you're interested in any of the tools I buy or what the tools I use, check the Amazon affiliates page. There's all my tools that I use for sale there. We got merchandise for sale. Check that out. And again, thanks for watching. We've got many more cool videos to come, and every time I get a project done, something else is coming in. There's going to be constant videos coming you guys' way. So thanks for watching.